So Christopher Nolan announces his next movie will be based on the Odyssey, and suddenly social media is flooded with people admitting that they have no idea what that is. Really? But my favorite comment is this because it got me thinking. Actually, how much Odyssey is in Assassin's Creed Odyssey? Well, we're gonna find out. Also, spoilers. First of all, maybe a very quick intro is in order. If you're already familiar with the Odyssey and its story, you can skip to this timestamp. So, what the fuck is the Odyssey? The Odyssey is an ancient Greek epic poem traditionally attributed to the blind poet Homer from the island of Chios. Although written down in the 8th century BC, the stories it tells are likely much older. It follows the adventures of Odysseus, king of Ithaca, as he struggles to return home after the Greeks' victory in the Trojan War. Along the way, he encounters many mysterious lands and mythical creatures, such as the monsters Scylla and Charybdis, guarding the Straits of Messina, the giant Cyclops Polyphemus who imprisons and kills his crew, and the witch Circe who turns his men into pigs. Despite his cunning and determination, Odysseus eventually loses his entire crew and ends up held captive by the nymph Calypso for 7 years. Eventually the gods take pity on him and allow his journey to continue. After another detour to the island of Corfu, where he's helped by King Alkinos of the Phaeacians, he finally makes it back to Ithaca. But there he finds his palace overrun by suitors who have been wasting his wealth and pressuring his wife Penelope to remarry. In the final act, Odysseus kills the suitors, reclaims his home, and reunites with his wife and son Telemachus. The end. The Odyssey is one of the most important works of literature in history. It has been taught in schools for centuries, if not millennia, and has inspired many other works from ancient poems to modern novels and films. Its impact is so strong that the word Odyssey has become synonymous with a long, eventful journey in many languages around the world. Seriously, check it out. It has been translated multiple times into English and it's also available in 200 other languages. If reading books isn't your thing, there's also the 1997 miniseries. It is a decent adaptation and you can find the full thing on YouTube. I put the links in the description. Now that hopefully everyone knows what we're talking about, let's first check if there are any parallels between the game's main story quest and the Odyssey. Obviously, the main story of Assassin's Creed Odyssey doesn't follow Homer's Odyssey exactly. It also uses elements from other Greek myths and historical events. But at its core, there are some key similarities. Like Odysseus, the Mythos embarks on a long journey with many stops along the way. Also, both stories revolve around loyalty, belonging, perseverance, and homecoming. And just like in the Odyssey, the Mythos path is constantly influenced, manipulated, or diverted by powerful forces. In Odysseus' case, these forces are mostly gods and monsters, Athena guiding him, Poseidon obstructing him, and encounters with mythical creatures like the Cyclops. In the Mythos story, these forces are a bit more grounded in reality, the cult of Cosmos, political schemers, and influential figures. While the threats are supernatural, they have the same narrative function as the gods and monsters in the Homeric epic, obstacles to overcome on the path home. Another shared theme is how both Odysseus and the Mythos rely on strength and cunning to survive. It's not just about brute force, both characters use their wits to navigate treacherous situations and outsmart their enemies. And ultimately, both stories end up with a reunion. Odysseus fights through hardship to reclaim his family and throne in Ithaca. In the same way, the Mythos battles through betrayal and conspiracies to reunite their fractured family and return to their roots in Sparta. The emotional core of both stories is the same, finding your way back home. So while Assassin's Creed Odyssey doesn't mirror Homer's Odyssey point for point, it does follow its central themes. But what about the direct references to the Odyssey? Let's start with the locations. When it comes to locations in Assassin's Creed Odyssey that directly relate to Homer's Odyssey, there aren't that many, which is somewhat expected as most of the places mentioned in the epic are in southern Italy, Sicily, and North Africa, which are areas outside the game's map. The most obvious reference is Ithaca, which is the small island next to Kefalonia. On it, there are 3 references to locations from the Odyssey that correspond to real-world sites. First is the Palace of Odysseus. This is probably the most prominent reference in the game. The ruins of a Mycenaean-style palace are located on the southern part of the island, and players visit it while going through the game's main story. However, this depiction doesn't align with the real-world site of Ithaca's Mycenaean Acropolis, which is located in the island's northern part. The second is the Cave of the Nymphs. According to the Odyssey, this cave is where Odysseus hid the gifts given to him by the Phaeacians upon his return to Ithaca. In the game, the cave is situated near the real-world location believed to be the Cave of the Nymphs, though there is nothing interesting inside of it. The third is Phorkys Bay. In the Odyssey, this bay is where Odysseus finally sets foot on his homeland after his long journey. The in-game bay is relatively close to the two real-world bays that have been proposed as the historical Phorkys Bay. There are also several references on Ithaca to characters and places from Homer's story that don't correspond to any actual historical sites. One is Evmeos Pig Farm, which is located in the middle of the island. Evmeos, a swineherd, was the first person Odysseus encountered upon his return to Ithaca. The other is Melanthios Goat Farm, found in the north. Melanthios was a goatherd who aided Penelope's suitors and was executed after Odysseus reclaimed his throne. Another reference is Ctesippus' shipwreck, located in the sea straits between the village of Sami and the palace of Odysseus. Ctesippus was one of Penelope's suitors who mocked and disrespected Odysseus when he returned to his palace disguised as a beggar. The final Homeric reference on Ithaca is Raven Rock, representing the place where Odysseus finds Evmeos after landing on the island. This one is a bit odd. While the Odyssey mentions a rock, the traditional interpretation refers to an elevated cave or a steep cliff rather than a flat rock on the beach like the one you find in the game. Outside Ithaca, there is a minor reference to the Phaeacians on the Corfu DLC. On the northern part of the map, you can find an area called the Peak of the Phaeaces, the Greek word for Phaeacians, along with the Tomb of Phaeax, the mythical father of King Alkinos. However, the DLC contains little content related to this part of the myth, and these references don't correspond to any real-world sites. Overall, while the locations in Assassin's Creed Odyssey include some nods to Homer's work, these are mostly concentrated on Ithaca and don't have depth beyond their name. I guess that's expected since the locations in the epic are mostly outside of Greece, but personally I would have expected a bit more, especially in the Corfu DLC. In addition to the locations, there are also several quests that directly reference the Odyssey. The most notable one is Odessa's quest. She's an NPC you meet at Odysseus' palace. Odessa herself is also a direct reference. She is a descendant of Odysseus who dreams of having adventures like her legendary ancestor. When you find her again in Megaris, you uncover a conspiracy involving the local leader and suitors trying to marry her for her fortune. This is a clear nod to Penelope and her suitors in the Odyssey. Elpinor, a cultist you meet at the start of the game, is also a reference. In Homer's Odyssey, he was one of Odysseus' crewmen who became drunk and fell to his death on Circe's island. In the game, he sends you on a quest to recover Penelope's shroud from Odysseus' palace, which is a direct nod to the famous weaving trick Penelope used to stall her suitors. Some of the game's boss fights reference one of the Odyssey's mythical monsters. Hidden around the map, you will find 3 Cyclopses: Arges, the bright one on Nisseros, Brontes, the thunderer on the Isle of Thisbe, and Steropes, the lighting bringer on Andros. In mythology, these Cyclopses were blacksmiths for the gods, not primitive giants like Polyphemus. However, the game chooses to portray them as monsters like the Cyclops in the Odyssey. Also, the Bay of Nobody, where Steropes is located, is a reference to Odysseus telling Polyphemus that his name was Nobody to trick him after blinding him. Some of the quests from the free DLC, The Lost Tales of Greece, also reference the Odyssey. The most notable one is A Friend Worth Dying For. In this quest, you help Varnavas find his lost wife through a series of missions inspired by the Odyssey's famous encounters. At the start on Skyros, you find Varnavas captured by a group of bandits who have drugged him with lotus flower wine. Then you meet a tall, one-eyed man named Polyphemus on the island of Anafi. On course, you explore an ancient tomb, filled with eerie sounds and sirens who are actually female followers of Ares. Also, near Paros, you confront a witch named Circe surrounded by tamed wild boars and lions. The final mission reveals that Barnava's wife is dead, but he has a daughter who, like Penelope, faces suitors after her fortune. At the end of the quest, you kill her suitors and reunite her with her father. There's also another more indirect reference in the quest, A Divine Intervention, where a mysterious woman sets you several trials. The game heavily implies that she's Athena, the goddess of wisdom. In the Odyssey, Athena serves as Odysseus' protector and mentor, aiding him throughout his journey, and this quest seems to be a reminder of her influence in the original Odyssey story. And that's about it. Besides an NPC name here and there, and maybe a dialogue reference, these are the most significant callbacks to the Odyssey I could find. And although these are by no means nothing, I feel that they are a bit too sparse, too superficial, and too disconnected from each other and the main storyline. Take the Corfu DLC for example. There's almost no mention of the story of the Phaeacians, Nafsika, or King Alkinos. Or look at Chios, supposedly the birthplace of Homer, yet there's not a single nod to him or his epic works. And while there are some nods to his other famous work, the Iliad, in various locations and quests, they are just as faint and shallow as the ones to the Odyssey. To me, these scattered pieces feel like the developers treated the connection to Homer as an afterthought, as if at some point in the development process they realized they needed to make a reference to the original Odyssey and just threw a few ideas here and there. This wouldn't bother me so much if the game wasn't literally called Assassin's Creed Odyssey. At the time the game is set and for centuries afterwards, Homer's Odyssey and Iliad weren't just stories, they were integral to the cultural identity of the ancient Greek world. I expected these epics to play a much more significant role in the narrative. Instead, they come across as occasional, disjointed references rather than something deeply woven into the game's story and environment. Unfortunately, this approach to the story elements in Assassin's Creed Odyssey is not limited to Homer's work. At some point, I should make a full video on the subject. But first, I need to finish the devlog on my VR history game. So if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please like and subscribe and ave atque vale.